Ladies and gentlemen, I'm back again with another edition of Felon's Talk. Somebody was in the comment section yesterday, asked me about what was his name again? Somebody asked me about Gary Etheridge. Of course, I know Gary Etheridge. I'm kind of wondering if he's still alive. He's quite old if he is. He's got to be in his 80s. Um, they also asked me about Casper. Casper died apparently in Oregon State Prison recently. Yes, I did know Casper, and they did a big story about him in the Atlanta Constitution back in the 78, I think, 77 or 78. And called him Casper the Unfriendly Ghost. Yeah, so I do know the guy. And I haven't thought about him in many years until one of the commenters one of the viewers commented in my last video. So yeah, I do know the guy, and yeah, why do people have to die in prison, man? That's crazy. That's the last place I want to die. Anyway, let's get on with the video. Today I'm going to talk about J Block in Lewisburg and what it was like when I first got to Lewisburg in 1977. 1977, J Block in Lewisburg was the honor block. And a lot of people called it Mulberry Street after the famous street in Little Italy in New York City, uh, because that's where all the Italian wise guys were. Uh, it took about 6 months to get to the honor block. If you didn't get any write-ups within 6 months, they would move you down there. Unless you didn't want to move. A lot of guys liked where they were at. They didn't want to move. But the wise guys, they tend to like to stay together in one area. So, and they don't get in trouble. That's one thing about wise guys in prison. They don't get in trouble. Um, they they might play a ticket. That's about it. Some of them might smoke a little weed on the side, but not very often. And they don't like it known, because the other older mob guys look down upon drug use. You know what I mean? The thing about wise guys is that they may kill in the streets. They may be gangsters and murderers, and they might run organizations and do this and do that. But once they get to prison, they're on like I'm a good boy status, like I'm not going to break any rules. I'm just not going to get in trouble. I'm going to go do all the things I have to do to get out as soon as I possibly can. And a lot of them are doing big time. Some of them aren't getting out, but they still do their time like that. You know what I mean? Whereas somebody like me, I'm coming into the system, I'm smoking weed, I make I make wine, I make my own hooch, I sell it, I drink it, you know. I'm definitely not going. I'm not going to spend years without without having a drink when I can make it myself. It's not that hard. It doesn't take that long, you know. Yeah. When I took my first drink of hooch was in Lewisburg. That was where I took my first drink of hooch. Guy passed it to me. I drank. I said, "What? What? This shit's real. This is strong, man. This is wow." I got lit. I was like, "Wow." And so I learned to make it. Naturally, it wasn't that hard, and I was off to the races. So yeah. So anyway, J Block in Lewisburg, Mulberry Street. Okay, I was there with ooh, who all was there when I was there? Matty Madonna, I believe, was there back in them days. Matty's been in and out of federal prison most of his life. He's back in now. I think he's in his 90s. Guy's still healthy, I think. Uh, he's done much time, murders and drugs, murders and drugs, and big guy, big guy in the heroin distribution world of New York. Uh, name everybody knows him. If somebody's listening to this video and doesn't know who Matty Madonna is, Google his name. Uh, he met Nicky Barnes in a state prison in New York way back in the like 60s, maybe. Yeah, I think it was. And then uh, he put Nicky on to his connection when Nicky got out of prison, and Nicky became a big heroin kingpin in West Harlem uh, from the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s on through till he got arrested and became an informant. And he ended up doing about 22 years, testified in numerous cases against. I think he, I think he ended up putting away like 64 people in total. He was constantly going back and forth to court to testify at trials of drugs, people that he had done business with over the years as the cases were being made uh, in the eastern and in the southern districts of New York City. Uh, Rick Nicky kept going back and forth to trial from the witsec units in, uh, in the federal prison system. He was in several witsec units, which are basically uh, autonomous units connected to a regular facility. There's one in Otisville, New York. There's one in Farrington, New Jersey. There's one in Black Rock Canyon, Arizona. There's one in, I want to say Minnesota, way up north in Minnesota. One of the Sandstone, Minnesota has a WITSEC unit. Uh, there may be others. There may be others. There have been other ones that were opened and closed. Uh, there was a WITSEC unit on the sixth floor of MCC Chicago until a good friend of mine by the name of Baby Huey and a guy by the name of Bernard Welch escaped and went down 6 flights of straight down on a. They made a like a they used a buffer, industrial strength buffer cord to lower themselves to the ground. I think Baby Huey might have broke his heel when he hit the ground. He hit it so hard, and they were gone. They were on the 10 most wanted list for a few months actually. Baby Huey ended up getting caught in Mississippi in the midst of a bank robbery. Right, it's a crazy thing. He was coming out of the bank. He had just robbed it, and he had a shotgun, sawed-off shotgun. And the shotgun actually broke when he was pushing the door. Like one of those doors where you push it open. He had the gun in his hand. The gun actually broke into two pieces in his hands. He threw the fucking gun down and just took off with the money. He had 30,000 in the bag, and he ran for like a half hour. Finally caught him. Bernard Welch got caught up in New York State, sleeping in a car. I don't know what the fuck. They got it. Once they escaped, uh, they kind of got into a beef. They had different aspirations about how they wanted to, uh, how they were going to handle their freedom. You know, Baby Huey wanted to go balls to the wall. He wanted to rob banks and stuff. Bernard Welch was all sketchy and didn't want to do anything wrong. But how the hell are you going to make a living? You got to have money to live. You're on the 10 most wanted list. You know. Anyway, they split up, and Baby Huey actually ended up traveling with a carnival. Right, he fell in love with a little girl in the carnival, and he was going along with the carnival, and they were in Mississippi, and you know, uh, she didn't know anything about him. She just thought he was a nice guy. She fell in love with him. He takes off one day. He's going to rob this bank and come back, and they're going to you know, continue on with the carnival, but he doesn't come back because he gets caught for robbing that bank. And when they go to his girlfriend to tell her that, we just caught your boyfriend, and she fainted, flat out fainted. She didn't know anything about uh, baby Huey being wanted by the federal marshals, about it. He was an escaped convict, that he was in a witness protection program, and that he was a bank robber. She just, when she heard all this, she just flat fainted. It's funny as shit. Anyway, uh, rest his soul. He died about 4 years ago of brain cancer. He did make it out. He did make it out. He got out about, I don't know, 10, 11 years ago. And he went to live with his girl that he met as a pen pal. And she stuck with him for the last 13 years of his sentence. Like I say, he got out about 10 years ago. They stayed together until about 4 years ago when he passed away of brain cancer. And Baby Huey was one of the guys who, along with Clay Fountain, had murdered, what the hell was his name? Steamboat. The repeat sexual offender. It was a great murder. You should have seen it. It was something to be, yeah, it was beautiful. Oh, but we're talking about something different here, aren't we? We're not talking about all these other little things. We're talking about J Block in Lewisburg. J Block in Lewisburg, and I'll tell you this. When I got there, I heard the rumors. Just was not a rumor. Everybody in the penitentiary knew. The Italian guys in J Block were paying a guy by the name of, come on now, let me think of his name. Oh, God. Wade Brown. Wade Brown from Washington, D.C. Big black guy from Washington, D.C. Smooth guy. He was kind of a shot caller for the DC guys. Now they say they don't really have shock. It was a guy who had a lot of respect coming, and the other DC prisoners kind of looked up to him and listened to him. Okay, so basically what happened is Washington DC prisoners came into the federal system not because every crime committed in Washington D.C. is a federal crime. That is not true. Washington, D.C. has its own penal code. Okay, it's just like every other state. It's called the District of Columbia's Penal Code. But they only have one prison, and that was Lorton, which is in Virginia, and it was overcrowded. So they sent a bunch of their D.C. prisoners into the federal system. Now that Lorton's been closed for several years, I guess all their prisoners are coming into the federal system, but not because they're committing federal crimes. It's because they're in Washington, D.C. under the D.C. code, a judicial code. So if there's no prison to send them to, they contract with the feds to send their prisoners into the federal prison system. They tend to be a little bit wild. So, like, for instance, like back in the day, I guess when you did a diagram of the people in federal prison, who were they and what were they in for? It was mostly bank robbers. Like 70% were like white bank robbers, and so as the years progressed, the demographics changed. It became more drugs and guns. They're given huge amounts of times for guns. I've seen people get 15 years just for having a shotgun as a felon in possession of a shotgun. Even the damn gun don't work. It might be broken. If they want to prosecute you for a fucking firearm, trust me, they're going to give you a fucking sentence that you're not going to like. 15 years? They think they call it the trigger lock law. It's still crazy To this day, it's still crazy. Uh, Good case in point was Chad. Chad from the Blood on the Razor Wire. He got 40 years. He had drugs. I think it was two different guns. The time he got for the drugs was minuscule compared to the time that he got for the two guns. The guy ended up getting 40 years. That's crazy, right? Of course, he made it out in 18. He was a good jailhouse lawyer. He got some breaks along the way. But yeah, I mean, there's still people sitting in prison rotting, over gun charges. So, bottom line is, the demographics change, guns, drugs, more diverse population, a lot more blacks, Latinos, stuff like that. And now it's gangs and all this stuff. It's changed a lot. Everything's changed. Um, I don't think I'd want to be in the federal system anymore. But give you an example of what I'm talking about. Take this guy from New York, Brooklyn, the butcher. They called him. Oh God, I forgot his name. They wrote a book about this guy. He had his own graveyard out on Staten Island. I mean, his own graveyard. He had like 20, 30 people buried out there, right? Tommy Karate, that's his name, Tommy Karate. Tommy Karate couldn't go 6 months without killing somebody. He was a serial killer, in the mafia. And how did they find out he's a serial killer? Is because he takes something from every victim that he has as a memento of that murder. And that's what they found when they finally got into his house and served a subpoena and a warrant and started going through his stuff. And they convicted him of all these murders. Plus there was other people testifying against him, etc. and so forth. And they dug up the graves, etc. Boom, right? He ain't committing no murders. He's been in prison now for 30 years. He ain't killed nobody. He's working in the hospital trying to save lives. I think he's I think he works in hospice care for the older prisoners that are dying and stuff. Yeah. See, when these guys, these fucking murderers, these crazy fucking mob guys get into prison, they don't kill nobody now. Difference is these young Aryan Brotherhoods, dirty white boys, Mexican mafia, other gang-related people coming to prison, young. They're looking to kill somebody. They want to make a name for themselves. You see what I'm saying? Whole different mindset, whole different way of thinking from the mafia, you know. So, like I said, you might have Matty Madonna, you might have Herbie Sperling, who's Jewish, but who had his own graveyard too. Uh, yeah, Herbie actually had a couple of murders committed in his name while I was in Atlanta. He had first he had Jerry Pappas killed. Then he had another guy by the name of Ortizi, Dominic Dominic Orsini killed. These two guys, and I know who killed them both. One was the Aryan Brotherhood. That was Ronnie Perrin, Danny Kavanaugh, and Alan Reed. They got and they beat the case on appeal. I think they indicted Herbie on that because Herbie paid him like $5,000, which was good money in it. 78 in the joint. And as soon as the murder was over, the case was over. DC goes back to Leavenworth, gets a big shot of heroin and dies right away. Overdoses. The other murder was Orsini. That was committed by a little redneck by the name of, the hell was his name? Ronnie Shepard from Kentucky. Ronnie had caught a murder case in Terre Haute over a homosexual. Him and Gopher and, the hell was his name? Larry Vaughn. We used to call him Sid Vicious. They caught a murder in 77, 78 in Terre Haute. So they got life sentences out of that. And he went on to commit a couple other murders, one of them being the Orsini murder in Atlanta. That was done for $5,000 also. And that was paid for by, you know, the little Jewish fella I just mentioned, who was kind of like considered a wise guy. You know, he was teamed up with the 116th Street crew out of East Harlem, and they were just dealing like incredibly like large amounts of heroin. I mean, Herbie Sperling he had a home, palatial home on Long Island. He had like two yachts. He had this, he had that. Good looking guy, man. He was a player, you know. He's a little guy, smokes big cigars, talks a lot of shit, you know. Very personable, very likable, you know, charismatic leader type individual. And so he'd be down there in J Block as well with all the other, you know, gangsters, the Italians. He fit right in with them because he was actually one of their crew, you know. And like I say, even though he was in with the murders, he wasn't taking them. He was only paying for them to happen. He wasn't involved himself. He would never get his hands dirty like that. On the streets, maybe that would be different. I think I remember hearing that he killed a guy, cut his head off, and then cut his hands off so they couldn't identify the body. And when they performed the autopsy, they found his teeth in his stomach. Apparently, they knocked him down when they punched him out, beat him up. They put the teeth back together and were able to identify the body through his dental records from the autopsy from his teeth. talk about uh, Talk about some detective work. There you go, huh? Anyway, uh, you know, this is the lengths that some people will go to maintain control and to stay out of prison and to help their friends. You know, like I think these murders in Atlanta were committed because Herbie knew that these guys were cooperating with the government and would soon be going back to testify in cases involving um, metric tons of heroin that were being, you know, brought into New York from Corsica and from France. And yeah, so anyway, but you get the picture. But all these tough guys, all these Italian mob guys are in J Block and they're paying Wade Brown to keep all these crazy ass Washington, D.C. dudes from breaking into their lockers or robbing them while they're coming home from. Because the D.C. prisoners they look at these old white men, they don't know the difference. They don't know they're big mob guys. They just look at them and say, oh, it's an old white guy, man. Let's mug him and take his fucking commissary, you know? You know, they don't know. He might be the don of some, you know, big crew in New York, you know. They don't know. They just take his commissary. So they had Wade Brown and they were paying him, literally paying him protection money, best way you can call it, because they weren't really capable of forming, you know, the kind of resistance to this shit that was required in that prison setting. And so they had money, so they paid Wade Brown, you know. Now, Wade was like a D.C. prisoner, and like a lot of D.C. prisoners, he had always had a little homosexual that he was in love with. Usually be a white one, you know. And yeah, it was crazy, man. It's insane. Later on in life, 20 years later, I end up in Raybrook, New York, which is a medium security prison up in the Catskill Mountains. No, Adirondack Mountains, way up by like Montreal, Canada, almost 60 miles from Montreal. Winters are like 6 months out of the year, snow up to your knees. Beautiful prison, though. It was like being on parole. Anyway, my cell partner there, I'll do a whole story about him on another episode. His name was Carmen Trattora, and I became his cell partner. He's a mob guy from Boston, and I'll talk about him later in another video. But the bottom line is, Carmen even told me, he said, "Yeah, you know, when he was on his first bank robbery case way back in the day, he was in J Block, and he was telling me how they used to pay. I mean, I already knew about this, how they used to pay Wade Brown, and yeah, so that's a known fact in the federal system from back in the day. It's not something that can ever be disputed. It's a fact. You know, I hate to say that because you know I'm Italian. You know, I don't like to see anybody having to pay anybody else for protection, but it wasn't looked at like that anyway. You know, it was looked at as just like a smart thing to do. You know what I mean? In that situation, but and that's it. You know, but in my younger days, man, I was against any of that type of stuff, and I didn't like the look of it. So I kind of try to, you know, I stayed to my own way of doing things. You know, and so that's the story for today. I'm running a little long here. It's like 26 minutes we're into this thing. I hope everybody's still paying attention and hit the like and subscribe. And I'll be back tomorrow with another story. Maybe I'll talk about Carmen Trattora and the Boston crew because I love those guys. They were such a great bunch of guys, man. You know, and anybody who's been in federal prison with Boston guys knows that they are some fun guys to do time with. So I'll see you tomorrow. Like and subscribe. See you tomorrow.